Podcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining our webinar today, Leverage User Insights to Enhance Your Summer Meals Program. My name is Emily and I'll be managing the back-end technical side of the webinar. So if you have any trouble with audio or with seeing the slides, go ahead and send your questions to me in the questions box on the right-hand side of your screen. If you have any questions throughout the webinar about the content that the speakers are sharing, please do chat those in via the question box as well. We will be doing Q&A throughout the webinar. If we don't get to your question that you've asked, by the end of the webinar, we will follow up via email with you. Via email afterwards, we'll send out the webinar slides and the recording and some resources that are shared and a survey as well. So if you can take that survey, it'll help us improve our webinars in the future. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Derek.
Thanks so much, Emily. This is Derek Lambert with the No Kid Hungry Center for Best Practices, and I just want to welcome everyone to today's webinar, as Emily mentioned, about leveraging user insights to enhance summer meals. And as you can see on the next slide, we want to recognize our generous supporter, the Arby's Foundation, for making this webinar possible. No Kid Hungry is a national campaign that's working to end child hunger by connecting kids to the healthy food they need every day, with a special focus on summer meals, school breakfast, and after-school meals. The Center for Best Practices provides the tools and resources that are needed to help elected officials, educators, and community leaders achieve success in fighting childhood hunger. We also share expertise and provide technical assistance to organizations or agencies working to end hunger in their state or community. And I just want to call out, we have a couple of webinars, including the one today, remaining in our monthly Schools Out, Foods In webinar series. As a reminder, we started these back in January, and we will conclude this year's series on June 13th. Recordings from past webinars are available on our website, bestpractices.nokidhungry.org. And the link to register for our June webinar will be available in the resources that go out following today's event. So thanks everyone for joining us, and please continue to stay tuned as the series continues in June. On the next slide, just want to go quickly over the agenda for today's event. And as a frontline, want to remind folks of the purpose of today's webinar, which is really to explore how community providers and program sponsors can look to participants themselves, specifically teens and parents of children, for guidance on successful program promotion and implementation. And we're going to do that with a quick review of the concept of human-centered design. User insights are a part of that. There's a lot more to it, so we'll share some additional resources if you'd like to dive deeper into that overarching concept. We're going to hear from my colleague Ria Rahman on strategies to elevate youth voices to improve user experience. And then we'll hear from folks at the Texas Hunger Initiative on how they have put focus groups into action and learn from what they've heard from parents and teens to actually incorporate those insights in program design and promotion. And then we'll share some summer meals outreach resources. And as you can see on the next slide, we will be taking questions from audience members. So please type in your questions over the course of the webinar. We will pause for audience Q&A and look forward to the opportunity to answer your questions. And I want to say that a big component of these events is really hearing from folks on the line and trying to answer those questions. And as Emily pointed out, even if we can't answer your question now, we'll commit ourselves to following up with you separately offline. So please don't hesitate to reach out with questions that you may have. So let's go ahead and get started with a really very brief overview of the concept of human-centered design. And today, today's focus on the importance of user insights in program design and outreach is embedded within a larger concept that we're really only going to briefly touch on, which is human-centered design, which is an approach to problem solving that starts with people and ends with innovative solutions that are tailored to their needs. And when you really seek to understand the folks you're trying to reach, and you do that by direct engagement, by asking questions, and you design programs from their perspective, then you're actually able to come up with and implement ideas that they will embrace. So this is really an approach that touches on both how you think about issues that you're trying to solve, or groups that you're trying to reach with the program, in this case summer meals, as well as what you do with that information. And again, we are not the, I would have to say I am not the expert in this area, but I chatted with my colleagues in program innovation and they really encouraged me to share information about IDEO, which is an organization that actually has a field guide on human-centered design. And this is a free resource that you can download. And if folks would like to dive a little bit deeper, I would encourage you to check out both of these links, which will be available in the slides following today's event. But if you go to the next slide, there are three aspects of human-centered design, which are around user desirability, which is the question if users want something, and users in this case, who is the user in summer meals? Well, we're thinking about participants, and also, so that can be children, teens, and also it's parents who make a decision about whether or not their children may participate in these programs. The economic viability from a sponsor perspective or from a community-based organization that's supporting programs, can we scale an intervention without creating a financial burden? And then technical feasibility, can we deliver an intervention reliably and maintain program quality at the same time that we're increasing access? And so, economic viability and technical feasibility, these are aspects that we've touched on in previous webinars around program planning, effective collaboration, mobile meals, and overcoming transportation barriers. I would encourage folks with some questions specific to viability and feasibility to refer back to previous trainings and other resources within the Center for Best Practices, and then to also recognize that there are resources around human-centered design if you're actually seeking to innovate actively in this space. But today, we're going to focus on user desirability. And for that, there are really two areas I'd like us to focus on. Adopting mindsets, right? So thinking about what is the mindset of folks that we're trying to reach. And this is really a way for us to learn directly from people. Open up to different creative possibilities based on what we learn, and then zero in on what's most desirable for those folks that we're designing for and that we're hoping to reach with summer meals. And then creating real impact. Once we've determined a range of solutions that might appeal to folks that we're working with, to those children and teens and parents, we then start to home in on what we can actually implement. This is a balancing act because, again, there is this viability and this feasibility, but it's one that's absolutely crucial to designing solutions that are successful and sustainable. And so on the next slide, with that in mind, today's discussion on user insights within the context of summer meals, it's incredibly important, and it's really a great way to engage users and develop additional buy-in for programs. But I want to remind folks that we're really just scratching the surface of some of the concepts and the strategies around human-centered design as a larger body of work. If you're inspired by what you learned today and you'd like to dive deeper, I'd recommend that you visit IDEO's Design Kit website, which is a place to learn more about the power of human-centered design, and they have books, guides, and free downloads to help you innovate and solve big problems. And again, I'm bringing this to you on the recommendations from my colleagues in innovation who really incorporate some of these perspectives in the groundbreaking work that we're doing around community meals and other innovations within child nutrition. So without further ado, I'm going to move on to the next slide and say that, we're thrilled to explore concepts of user insights and desirability as it's applied to summer meals. And we're going to start by considering how to engage teens to secure their active participation and engagement. We're going to hear from colleagues with experience in this area to better understand the perspective of teens and how teens prefer to receive information about programs like summer meals. So to kick us off, I'm thrilled to introduce Ria Raman from Share Our Strength's Youth Engagement and Grassroots Advocacy Team, who's going to share best practices around youth engagement and elevating youth voices. Ria, thanks for joining us today.
Perfect. Thank you for that intro, Derek. So like he said, I work on youth engagement and grassroots advocacy here at Share Our Strength. A lot of people don't realize that we have a platform specifically devoted to reaching our target audience of 13 to 25 in this issue. And so working with teens, really trying to get them to raise awareness about the program as well as utilizing the programs that are available to them and making sure that they are active participants in this issue and the programs that we are working on. And so I get to hear a lot of examples all across the nation of things that are going really well and support others in helping to adapt these practices. And then another thing that I work on is our Youth Ambassador program, which provides college students to nonprofit organizations to work on these issues. So we are going to have Youth Ambassadors working with Summer Meals Partners this year as well. So a lot of these examples that I mentioned are sourced from them directly, who are working with teens at sites and things like that. So just wanted to make sure I mentioned them. There's some photos of their smiling faces just to encourage us on this afternoon. But jumping into that, I'm going to go into elevating youth voices to improve user experience. Derek talked about mindset and understanding the mindset to create an experience for our clients, our participants, which are kids and teens. And so if you don't talk to them, it's really hard to adopt their mindset and understand where are they coming from, what are their needs, what is going to help them get to a place where they can utilize these programs to their fullest potential. And so there's multiple ways to gather insights from youth for summer meals, working towards active participation and engagement, rather than just offering the meal and saying, why aren't they coming or why aren't they utilizing this program, really working with them to be a part of that experience. So one of the easy ways to engage a little bit of participation from students is actually menu tasting. So if you are a summer meal sponsor or maybe a school, you have the purchasing power, you're making the decisions as adults on what food will be purchased for serving, but asking students and teens specifically for their input on that food is really helpful and goes a long way in making the teens feel like they have a role, that they're able to provide helpful feedback, and then they get excited about the meals that are being offered. An example of menu tasting that's actually really critical, we have a wonderful partner in Ohio, and they utilized menu tasting to discover that they needed to be serving more culturally competent meals, and that came from students themselves, right? They were providing input on, hey, I don't eat sandwiches at home. I'm not going to come all this way to eat sandwiches here. This is just not food I'm familiar with or interested in. So gathering that insight from the clients, the participants, and making those decisions on what can be served. Another thing is focus groups. So this is kind of a next level engagement. It does require more of a hands-on approach. You have to gather a group of students who are invested, who are probably going to be spending a good amount of time with you all, really creating a space where they're comfortable to talk about the challenges, the barriers to access, the things about the program that need to be changed. Being able to offer candid feedback and being willing to be held accountable for what they say. So gathering those students, if you have access to students through the school system, or if you are a summer meal sponsor from a school district, then you probably have an easier time of getting students together in a room. But for others, it can be a little bit more difficult. So making sure that we're creating that space, like I said, to offer candid insight. It's definitely more of a bigger lift, but worthwhile long-term if you are going to adopt that mindset and really have that frame of reference for building, creating, and sustaining your program. Survey and evaluation. So this is actually something that I think any summer meal site can implement. It's not as heavy lift of having a consistent focus group where you are having to facilitate the conversation. A survey is really helpful in gathering just initial insights as to, how did you like the food today? Or is there anything that is different? How did you hear about our program? Those types of things. I think one really great way of utilizing surveys is actually to have young people, teens or kids, at sites be the people who are implementing those surveys and actually asking those questions. I'm not sure about this group, but I almost never, as an adult, get the answer I want from a young person. They're more likely to respond to people their age, and we've seen success in having our college-aged youth ambassadors actually applying surveys. So, for example, we had Julia last summer in Massachusetts. She was in a rural area. She was a college student. She was close in age to the kids at the sites, and so she was able to administer surveys and really relate to them and bond with them and get candid answers that we probably wouldn't if we were to go to a site like that. And so trying to utilize the staff you have on hand or young people who are already at the sites to ask those questions is a really great way to get them involved. And that all ties into roles and responsibilities. Young people can be active parts of your meal sites. We have great partners in St. Cloud, Minnesota, where they actually hire teens as their meal counters, specifically high school students. And so they are able to incentivize the students to be the people counting the meals that meets one of their requirements for the program itself, but it also helps because these high school students are actually mentoring a lot of the kids at the sites. They're building those relationships on the ground. A lot of those kids come back and they say, next summer, I want to be a meal counter. I want to be the person who has this role and responsibility in implementing the program, and that makes them want to come and be active participants because they see themselves in this program, or they feel like they have a role that they need. In sites, in Mobile Meal Routes in Las Vegas, we have our youth ambassadors who actually rely on a lot of the kids who come consistently to help with setup and breakdown, and the kids are ready and they're excited, and it's a really low lift to say, hey, can you help me pull some of these chairs out of our truck, or hey, do you mind helping me grab the milk crates? And just asking for a little bit of help, but they feel that ownership. They feel like, hey, they're counting on me. I want to be here. I want to bring my friends. I have a really great role in this, and continuing to expand on their interest and working in this program and utilizing this program to its fullest potential. So those are some examples of ways to elevate youth voices to improve user experience. It does take a little bit of a lift getting there, and so I'm going to talk about the building blocks of youth engagement here, just because it can be daunting. If you or your organization doesn't have a history of working with young people, it's hard to discover, what's the best way. I think that's a question we constantly ask ourselves. We're always learning on this, so no one has the perfect way to engage youth. We, in partnership with Sodexo Stop Hunger Foundation, actually conducted a study where we asked youth, what is the best way to get in touch with you, or how do we get your feedback and insights and things like that? And so that's how we created the Youth Engagement Toolkit, and this is where these building blocks are from. So I'm just going to lightly go over them, and of course, if you have more detailed questions, feel free to go and look at the Youth Engagement Toolkit that is linked in here, or ask those questions through the chat like Emily and Derek had mentioned. That being said, I'm going to jump right into it. The first thing that you can do in youth engagement is actually ask youth, right? Ask them, what do you want from this program, or how do you want to be involved, or what's the best way for us to work together? They are the clients, the participants, but you can have that really close relationship, but it's better when it's coming from them and not from an adult deciding for them. So letting the youth know, we need you. We need you to be a part of this. We want to hear your insights. There aren't right or wrong answers around this. There is definitely a space for you to be involved. So that's the first thing. So if you are at a site, ask them, how do you want to be involved? How can we make this program better for you? Being genuinely inclusive. So making sure to incorporate needs, assets, and perspectives of youth. Making it a strategic priority, right? Your program can't succeed unless youth are utilizing it to their fullest potential. So it has to be a strategic priority, and making sure that your program is sustainable long-term and that you are reaching as many kids as possible. And so being willing to accept that feedback. Sometimes young people can be really critical, but being able to understand, like, help me understand how you got to this, or why you think this way, and how can we make it better, and holding yourself accountable. If you are working with them, make sure you're including their ideas, or making sure you're sharing your platform with them to share those thoughts and insights and things like that. Number 3, working with schools as a means to engage youth in the issue. If you have schools that are not serving summer meal sites, but throughout the year, maybe you can do stuff with students. Working with schools, if you are a school district that's working as a sponsor, you really do have a lot more access to students, but making sure that there are partnerships on the ground to kind of get an entryway into working with students. Appreciating youth in their perspective. This is really important because everyone wants to feel appreciated, especially young people. If you're asking something from them or asking them to give you insight and perspective, making sure that you are really appreciating them, making sure that they feel like their contributions matter and that they should be celebrated, because this isn't something that's common yet. Not every single person is doing this. And so a lot of the time just going a little ways and saying thank you for your participation, I think that really does make a lot of great headway into working with youth. And this is, like I said, the study was created from youth and their perspectives, and that was something that they valued. And then being responsive and authentic. So if they are working with you more closely, being sure to respond to them, communicating with them on their level, I think is really important. Making sure that you're not talking down to them or using terms and things that they don't understand, adding context to, if they're like, well, why can't I have pizza every day? Well, explaining, hey, there are some requirements around this program, but let's talk about these requirements together and how do we fit within these needs of like the nutritional requirements of the summer meals program, and helping provide that context so they're on the same level as you, rather than you saying, well, this won't work or that won't work, helping them understand why and then creating better ideas together. Using the right communication platform, so email, text, and social media. I am going to brag on John and Xiomara a little bit because I know they did a great job of this last summer, but they had an entire video series that they made with teens at summer meal sites called Billy Sent Me, and they had the teens create these videos of how to find a summer meal site near them, and they used their texting hotline, but it was talking to youth on their level. It was having people that they could relate to. It was making sure it was on a platform that youth are using. Rather than, Facebook, which no one really is using Facebook. And so making sure you're prioritizing how you're communicating based on what young people want. And it's okay to ask that question if you don't know. What platform do you prefer? How do you want to stay in touch? Or how would you like to know about the meal times for these summer meal sites? Or how would you like to know about any changes in our meal delivery schedule or things like that? Is there a better way to communicate with you? Something along those lines. Asking that question, going back to number one, always ask them of how they want to be involved. So yeah, and building those relationships with them. So that is kind of what I've got on youth engagement.
That's great. Thank you so much, Ria. And some things that really shine through in some of your remarks is really talking about the importance of being earnestly engaged, really seeking input from youth and then engaging them authentically during that process to incorporate what they might have to say, whether it is ideas for improvement or feedback or changes to the program maybe that could be feasible. And then, asking and answering questions, right? Maybe answering why we can't have a certain meal every day, or asking how you do prefer to receive information. So it sounds like really the authenticity and the earnestness with that engagement and really being willing to ask and answer some of those questions is really important. Is that right?
Yeah, and I think it says it here, it's about personal relationships. You have to have that like give and take relationship, and you can't have that without everything that you just said. It can't be a one-sided conversation. And so that's really the building blocks of working with youth for user designed experiences.
That's great. You touched on this, Ria, and we know that a lot of these building blocks are pulled from the youth engagement toolkit that you mentioned at the beginning. And it sounds like there's a lot of great information in that toolkit. Can you talk about how listeners might think about, when and how they might access this resource to engage youth more effectively in their programs?
Yeah, so I talked a little bit about making youth engagement a strategic priority. Our organization recognized that we need to work with youth in order to end childhood hunger, because this is an issue that directly affects them. And so this entire toolkit was created to help guide us in how should we be engaging young people in this issue? How should we be engaging them in in the different meal programs and things like that? And so this was created specifically for any other organization, nonprofit or not, to be able to utilize this information to think strategically of how should they engage youth. So it can't be summer meals, it could be anything else as well. We use it for our advocacy campaigns of grassroots advocacy, right? That's how we've utilized this youth engagement toolkit. We can encourage it for, I literally did a breakfast webinar last week where we talked about the same toolkit and using this information to help implement ideas around school breakfast and working with youth to do that. It's really transferable in a lot of different ways, especially like across issues. So if you're thinking about, hey, I have a touch point with youth, or I need to think about them strategically, whether they're my clients for these programs or whether they are part or adjacent to something we need, being able to have this as a resource to just reflect on like, where should I start, right? We can go any which way. This is really just meant to be that starting point. And then of course we're here as we are constantly learning from our great partners all across the nation to provide additional support and share learnings as needed.
That's great. And you went ahead and you shared some really great concrete examples from Nevada and from Minnesota and Ohio, places where specifically youth ambassadors, No Kid Hungry youth ambassadors, have really engaged youth and kind of led the work around some of these efforts. I think I recall saying there were some blog posts actually that feature some of the work of our youth ambassadors. Could that be potentially a resource for folks to get some ideas?
Absolutely, and even more from our blog on the same vein of connecting with people where they are. We actually prioritize social media as our platform for our youth. So we hand over our social media account. It's at Generation NKH for anyone who's interested. But we hand our social media accounts over to our youth ambassadors every summer to show their perspective from the field, to actually give them our platform to share their voices and their stories, and be able to utilize that. And so that's an example of how we've taken these learnings and literally hand our resources over to the young people that we work with, because they know better and they're directly in the field and they are able to report back and share these really great things that we don't get to see very often. So that's probably a great way. And then of course our blog, we do try to highlight our youth ambassadors regularly, but they've just got incredible stories and experiences, being close in age to the kids we're trying to help, but also having that like personal relationship, going to sites and being mentors and things like that. They all have a level of investment that it's surprising but shouldn't be surprising, which is a really great part of the work that we do. That's
great. Thanks, Rhea. And for those folks that are listening on the phone, we will follow up with a link to the toolkit, a link to the blog that highlights some of the youth ambassadors' work, and also a link to the generation information on how to access Generation No Kid Hungry and really see what that looks like from the No Kid Hungry perspective as it pertains to youth engagement. So thank you so much, Rhea, for sharing and for the good work that you're doing. We're going to go ahead and move on, and we're going to drill down into one of the strategies that Rhea mentioned early on, which is focus groups as a way to solicit user perspectives, both teens and parents in this case. And for that, on our next slide, I'm really thrilled to introduce from the Texas Hunger Initiative our panelists who are going to share about the work they've been doing in the Houston area. John Puder is the Regional Manager for Child Hunger Outreach with the Texas Hunger Initiative for Baylor, which is part of Baylor University. John is working with communities to fight food insecurity by increasing participation in summer meals, after-school meals, and school breakfast programs. Prior to joining THI, which is the Texas Hunger Initiative, John served as the social marketing coordinator for Harris County Systems of Hope. His career has included working for public officials and campaigns. John earned his bachelor's degree from the University of Texas San Antonio and a Master of Public Affairs degree from the University of Texas LBJ School. Hook 'em horns. At the LBJ School, John was a Barbara Jordan Scholar. And we're also fortunate to be joined by Xiomara Arden, Child Hunger Specialist at THI. She is in the Houston office with John and graduated from the University of Houston with a bachelor's in communication studies. Prior to joining THI, Xiomara worked for a nonprofit organization specializing in women's health care, where her focus was to develop trainings, conduct and administer programs that train clinical and non-clinical staff and improve their skills and knowledge. Xiomara is now focused on eliminating hunger throughout the Houston region by collaborating with community partners and raising awareness of the importance of adopting effective models to increase breakfast, after school, and summer meal participation. And we're really thrilled as they've come with us today as panelists to share their experience and the outcomes of the focus groups that they conducted in the Houston region. So John, Xiomara, thank you so much for joining us. We're thrilled to have you.
Derek, it's a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you so much for having us.
Hey, well, I'm going to hand it over to you guys. Take it away. We're excited to hear from you.
All right, wonderful. Well, so first we want to thank you for including us and having us be a part of this great webinar series. What you guys do is incredible. We learned so much from it, and so we were really excited when you invited us to participate. Wanted to share a little bit about what we learned from our focus groups, why we did them, and how we did them. And so in our work, we spend a lot of time thinking about summer meals and how we're going to increase participation in summer meals. And and how we get more kids to participate, more parents to participate. And to that end, we have sponsors come together to talk about planning. So one of the first things we did at THI was, in the Houston region, was we called all the sponsors together. We sit down at a table and we talk about how we're going to promote summer meals, how we're all going to work together to create awareness, how we're going to raise participation through several different means. And we've been doing that for several years now. And what we're learning is that whatever it is we're doing is not working. You know, I love the Albert Einstein quote of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. Well, we decided we can't just keep doing the same thing over and over again. We need to come up with something different. And so what our sponsors really said to us was, we need to find a new way. We need you to go out there and find a different way of getting these results. And so we decided we were going to look at two different groups. One group was going to be teenagers, because teenagers we thought would be the ones who would make decisions for themselves as to whether or not they're going to come out and participate. And the second group was parents of elementary school children. And so we talked to a lot of different parents about what it is it would take them to participate. We asked them a lot of questions. And so we tailored some of these focus groups. So Hazia might have talked to you a little bit about what we found, and we'll go from there. So the whole idea was that our sponsors tasked us with going out and getting some results, finding some answers to these questions. And so we designed some focus group studies, and here's what we learned. Next slide, please.
Perfect. So before we get started, I just want to say again, thank you, Derek, for having us. So I'm going to go ahead and dive in onto what we learned whenever we did conduct these focus groups. And so first things first, what parents told us was the fact of how much they dread summertime, how their stress levels actually go up, and how they become anxious months prior to summertime, because it means that their children are going to be home during summertime, which means they're going to have to buy more groceries when summertime comes. And if they have to buy more groceries, then that means it's also going to affect their budget. And so summertime is definitely a stressful time for parents. They talked about how important it is for their children to attend school, because they do rely on the school lunch program and the school breakfast program. And so that's one of the biggest things that they really did stress. The other thing that we really talked about was the summer meal program. And so we learned that there was definitely a lack of awareness with regards to the summer meals program. And so when we talked about the program itself, one, they were very excited to learn that there is such program. And two, they really wanted to learn about how do we get there? Where can we find locations? And so it makes sense on why, it all made sense for us on why they didn't, it made sense, I'm so sorry. It made sense on why these summer meal sites were very important to these parents, because they are heavily reliant on the school lunch program and the school breakfast program.
So what it led us to see was that all the work we've been doing to raise awareness was not reaching the folks we needed to reach when it came to parents. There was very, very limited knowledge about the program existing itself, and those people who were aware of the program weren't aware of the tools available for finding the closest summer meals program. So that was one of the really key pieces of information we're getting, that what we're doing is not reaching those parents. So next slide, please.
All right, so along with the challenges, one of the things that parents really express is the way that they get from one place to another. So they're heavily reliant on the city bus. And so here we call it the Metro bus system. They have the Metro Rail system, they have the Metro City bus that they ride on a daily basis. And then the other thing that they're heavily relying on is their foot. So they commute by walking, right? And so transportation is a huge issue for them, as you can imagine. So one of the things that they were really concerned about is the summertime, because it gets really hot here in the state of Texas. And so a lot of these parents find themselves walking with their children on strollers. And so that can easily deter them from getting to a site. The other thing that they talked about were when they find themselves walking, they come across a lot of stray animals. And so that will also deter them from actually getting to a site. The other thing that they talked about that was of concern to them was the lack of sidewalks. And so we really got to tap into what their day-to-day looks like and how this can actually affect our children to get to an actual site. So it was really good being able to have these conversations with them, because these are things that someone that's not dealing with these challenges will think of, and so it really allows us to dig in a little more and hopefully start getting in contact with other organizations, with the city, to talk about what can we do, how do we make, how do we take care of the stray dog issue, how do we get more sidewalks so that way parents can have more access to these sites such as parks, libraries, and things of that nature.
So one of the things we learned is we spend a lot of time really just focused in on summer meals and making sure that we have enough summer meal sites in place. But what we learned from this is that our role is going to have to be bigger than that. We're going to also have to think about transportation issues, working with the city on making sure that people are able to walk on safe sidewalks, safe pathways, that the stray dog issues are being addressed, that there are effective metro systems to get people from one place to the other. And so our task, our job is now bigger than just let's find more summer meals. It's let's find ways to connect parents who are bringing small children to the summer meal sites in an effective way. Something we would have never learned had we not been able to talk to these parents.
Exactly. Thank you for that. The other thing is that, as I mentioned earlier, most of these parents had no clue that the summer meal program actually existed. And so with that, it only makes sense that they're not aware of the resources that are actually there to point them out to sites that they can actually access. And so some of those tools, if you're not familiar with them, are texting, using the texting lines, 877-877, where anyone can text food or comida, and then it'll prompt them to enter their zip code or their address, and then it'll ping the closest location that's offering free meals to children. And so that was very huge. There's a lack of awareness for the program, so there's also going to be a lack of awareness for the actual resource itself. The same thing with using 211, a phone number they can contact by just dialing 3 numbers, that can also help them find a location. But because there is a lack of awareness, it makes it impossible for them to be aware of where these sites are located. And then one of the biggest issues that we really came across was the immigration issue. Many of the parents that we had an opportunity to speak with were Spanish speaking. And this was really huge. And I think this was definitely one of those things too, where building a relationship with these parents was very, very important, because it got to a point where they were very comfortable speaking to us about what's another thing that's going to deter them from getting to these sites. A lot of these parents are under the impression that they do need to register to participate in the program, or maybe I need to give you my ID, or maybe I have to give you some information, and then you're going to use that information and share it with someone else or with immigration. And so those are a lot of things that they're under the impression that they need to participate in the program. And so I think it's very, very important. And another thing that we need to work on is really demything those myths that they believe are going to keep them from participating in the program as well. So I think that, with a lot of the things that are going on right now, that is of concern to them. They talked about how they're no longer applying for the WIC program as well, because they're afraid that they might, they're in fear of becoming deported. And so I think that's one of the things, another thing that we really do need to focus on and work on, and just talking to them and saying like, hey, you don't need to register, you don't need to provide us with any information to be able to benefit from this great program. And so that was another huge challenge that we talked about with these parents, or I should say that they expressed over to us.
So next slide.
All right. And so in speaking with our parents, we also learned that it is important that we incorporate a lot of the promotional material that promotes the summer meal program in their day-to-day. And so a lot of these individuals say, hey, we travel by metro. Why aren't these signs on these metro buses? You know, can you guys put this information on billboards? Can you have these on our local newspaper ads, or use the news media to promote the program? And so even though we try to touch on those things throughout the summer, it's not enough. And so they want the message to be more consistent. What we did learn is that they trust the school system. And so we want to get information out to them where it's going to be, where they're going to take it and run with it is utilizing the school. And so if we learn that it is important that we collaborate with school officials, so maybe using their robocall system, maybe using school applications that will text these parents about the summer meal program. What else? Well, the point is that we really do need to collaborate with school systems, so that way, whenever any information goes out, it's coming from school, and they're more prone to listen because they trust the school. The other thing we learned is that I know Ria mentioned social media platforms. One of the things that we did learn is that parents are actually Facebook is the thing for parents, and so it's not the thing for teenagers anymore, or I don't know if it ever was, but the social media platform that parents are more likely to use is going to be Facebook. So.
Next slide.
All right, so with teens, so I'm going to go ahead and dive in and talk about what teens told us during our focus groups. As you can imagine, teenagers had no clue about the summer meal program. So that's for starters. So we found ourselves having to introduce the program for the first time with all of these students that we had an opportunity to speak with. I think there was maybe one or two from the 5 or 6 focus groups that we focused that were based around teens that were aware of the program. And so as you can imagine, just like the parents, because there was a lack of awareness for the summer meal program, they weren't going to be aware of the tools such as the texting 877-877 or the 211. And so again, it was one of those things where we found ourselves having to explain what it was, how it benefits you, and all of those good things that come with the summer meal program. The other thing that we learned is that most students or most teenagers actually stay home during the summer. And there was a small portion that do travel out of the country, or may go out of the city. But for the most part, most teenagers do stay at home. And so this could be a good and it could be a bad thing. Because when students are staying home, what we learned is that they're actually playing PlayStation, they're playing Xbox, they're on social media. And so what we're doing right now is we're basically trying to compete with someone going to a site and then someone staying at home while they play with all of these Xbox or PlayStation games live. And so they're being self-entertained at home, and there's no reason or motivation for them to actually go out to a summer meal site. We learned that we have to get very creative about promoting the program and incorporating, extracurricular activities, or incorporating, or advertising, hey, we have free Wi-Fi, or we have a splash pad, or we have a softball game that's going on, to try to make it more appealing for them to actually go out. So if we're just going to promote a summer meal program and say, hey, come and get a free meal, the chances of these teenagers actually making it to the location is probably slim to none. And so I think if John and I learned anything from these focus groups, is the importance of making it more appealing to them, so that way they can actually go to a summer meal site as well.
So one of the big things we really learned and got a pullback from on this is that teenagers more and more are actually staying home. So for the last several years, we've been trying to learn where the teenagers come to congregate so we can create summer meal sites. But this tells us that we really have to change our strategy. So even in the last 10 or 20 years, the life of teenagers has dramatically shifted. In the past, teenagers would go places and hang out with their friends. Now the hangout is an electronic version. They are engaging with their friends, but they're doing it over Wi-Fi or playing games or talking. So they're not leaving the home. So we have to create a whole very different way of thinking about how we're going to motivate teenagers to come out and come to the summer meal site instead of trying to find a summer meal site. So it really changes the way we think of things and look at the world.
Yes, thank you for that, John. With that said, we know that promoting is going to be it's going to be definitely a different approach when we compare it to parents and teenagers. One of the biggest things that we came across and that we learned is that teenagers do not want to do or have anything to do with the word free. It feels as if what they said in their words is, I feel like someone feels sorry for me. I feel like the word free means I feel pity for you. And so one of the things that we learned is that we don't want to use the word free because that can easily deter them from actually showing up. So I think that's one of the things that we took away from it. And the other thing that they said that was, it's not on here, but they did say, stop trying to make the promotional material cool and just make it short, simple, and to the point. So I thought that was a great takeaway for us. And it's very interesting because when we spoke with parents, it is the complete opposite. If you word the promotional material with the word free, it does the complete opposite. It's going to push them to look for these locations and actually get them to go, whether they have to walk a minimum of 30 minutes or not. And so it's just very interesting to see how you have two different responses from the teenage population and also the adult population. So when you're looking at parents, they're like, hey, you said it's free, we will be there. And if you look at the teenager side, it's the complete opposite. You will deter them from actually making it to a summer meal site.
So when we do our marketing, we realize that when we're targeting parents and we're targeting teenagers, the verbiage has to be different. And so our marketing materials have to be different. We have to market in one format on Facebook to parents and a very different format to teenagers, using different words and different language. Next slide, please.
So I want you to think about what we as adults envision whenever we talk about the summer meal program. We think about how happy it is, how we're making a difference, how every child has access to a meal. And this is really what we envision.
Right. So this is what, when I say free summer meals, this is what I see. And this is, I think, what a lot of us see. When we told teenagers free summer meals, what they saw is on the next slide. They see that. When we say free summer meals, they're assuming we're talking about soup kitchen with the images from, you know, from the Great Depression of people lining up for a free meal. So that was pretty shocking and pretty stunning to learn from our side, that they even what we say and what we envision is not what they're hearing. And so we really have to change what we say and how we're saying it. So next slide, please.
Yes. So the other thing, there's a different translation, as John mentioned right now, and that's one of the things that we came across whenever we actually conducted these focus groups, was that if there is someone that is an authority figure, they're not going to talk to you. And it's similar to what Ria shared with us. They want to hear from their peers. So if we as adults go and try to approach them, there's nothing relatable to them about us. And so they're going to shut down and just not be engaged. And so I think it's very important, as Ria mentioned, that you do try to get someone that they can relate to, so that way you can get information from them, valuable information that can help us make a difference. Another thing that our teenagers actually spoke about were using celebrities to promote the program. And although we know this is something that they want, they really couldn't tell us who exactly they would be interested in having as a promotional figure.
So we asked them about who do you want for your celebrity spokesperson. And what they told us was a whole bunch of different names, to the point where Some of the celebrities, some of the students throughout, the other students had never heard of. So we're still trying to figure this part of it out.
Yes. And so with social media, I have to say, or I must admit, I was really shocked about the fact that Facebook is not a thing, and it's probably because Facebook is my thing. So I was expecting them to also say Facebook, but no, Facebook is it's not a social media platform that's used within teens, at least not within those focus groups that we had an opportunity to talk to. So we learned that Instagram is going to be the first platform or the most popular platform. The second platform is going to be your Snapchat, and then the third platform is going to be your YouTube channel. And so, as you can see, YouTube's used more for music, for do-it-yourselves, for entertainment purposes. And then the last thing that we learned was that our teens would much rather use the texting tool to get the information. So now that they learned that there is a summer meal program and they can actually find a location by texting or by calling, they would much rather use the text line as it is more convenient for them.
Right. So the texting tool was much more popular than phone calls or even looking it up on the web. And so we've learned that is going to be the tool we're really going to learn. We're going to use the focus to promote the summer meals program, particularly to teenagers. And what Xiomara talked about, Instagram clearly is the preferred platform for at least the teenagers we talked to. Snapchat was up there, but clearly Instagram is more. And while few of them actually mentioned YouTube, they almost all said that they all go to YouTube to see videos. It's just not the platform they use to communicate. So if we want to talk to them, we probably need to talk to them through Instagram, but we can also know that there is going to be an ability to put videos up on YouTube, and most of them will be able to see them. Next slide. So the way we put this together really was we brought all of our sponsors together, and they're the ones who challenged us to come up with this and to go out and do these focus groups. And it was really important that we come back with them with some of the findings.
All right. So after we got everyone together and we determined that focus groups were going to be critical for us to figure out what were the challenges and how we can actually find solutions to these challenges, we went out and we immediately asked for volunteers. And so the great thing about this is that we have great relationships with a lot of the food nutrition directors, and so they really connected us with the schools. And our what really worked was the fact that these schools already have parent engagement activities that happen on school grounds, and so it was very easy for us to actually get connected through the nutrition directors. Once we got there, we had an opportunity to join, and right after those events, we were able to connect with these parents and conduct these focus groups. We wanted to make sure that we were prepared, so what we did is we gathered a list of questions based on the collaboration we had with our stakeholders. We wanted to make sure we had all of the materials, so we had our name tags, our pins, our papers, and most importantly, the note takers. So it is very important that you have your note taker, and I would even say at a minimum of 2 note takers as a backup, because it is a lot of information that you guys will be taking. Once that's completed, I mean, you have to go to the next step, which is extracting the information, all of those responses, summarizing, and then, of course, setting up a follow-up meeting so that way you and your team of stakeholders can start discussing the challenges and then working towards solutions to fix the problems that we're challenged by.
It's great. Thank you guys so much, John and Xiomara, and it's really just incredible. It's really interesting to hear how you put these groups together, and obviously the findings around platforms to communicate information, the messages that parents responded well to versus teens, and the distinctions there. That's really interesting. And a question, and something you mentioned, Xiomara, earlier, is the fact that it was really important to build trust with these participants, these focus group participants, in order to be able to have these individuals speak honestly about their experiences, which is really what you're looking for. what are some specific actions your team took to develop trust among focus group participants?
So one of the things that was very critical was knowing our audience, and so we are very thankful because of the relationship that we also have with our nutrition directors. They were able to tell us, like, hey, this community is heavily populated with XYZ. And in this case, it was a Latino population, right? And so we knew that we were going to need a Spanish speaker as a moderator, so that way they can actually relate to the participants. And so once, in my case, I speak Spanish, so it worked out beautiful. I got there, I was very friendly, and most importantly, I was very transparent about what we were here for, what is our goal, and what we plan to do with this information. And then most importantly, to reassure that everything that you divulge during this focus group is confidential. And so it all felt like a conversation among friends, and they felt very comfortable talking, and it created a healthy dialogue with a lot of great and valuable information.
So with the parents, Xiomara did a great job because she really turned it into a conversation, keeping in mind that we all the time had a focus that we had very specific questions we wanted to see answered and be able to drive that to. Teenagers, of course, were a lot tougher to engage. And so we learned as we went through the process. I'll tell you, our first focus group was a bit of a challenge. It was like trying to get them to share was not so easy. But we learned from that one, we needed to be in a less formal setting. We learned to be willing to switch out moderators depending upon which one the students appeared to be more comfortable with. We wanted to make sure that dialogue was able to, even if it went off topic, allowed it to go off topic, knowing that we would try to bring it back to the specific questions we're trying to get answered. But it is a challenge sometimes, to particularly with teenagers, to get them engaged. And it is a trust factor. So a lot of what Ria was talking about earlier is a great lesson in that getting teenagers to feel comfortable to talk means creating an environment where they feel safe, where they feel that what they're sharing is valuable, that it will be considered, that's going to be taken in, and that we're not just there to ask a bunch of questions, but what we're actually there is asking for their help to teach us, and so that we can learn from them.
That's great, and I think that's a great note to end on. And I do know we got a couple more questions from the audience that we're unable to get to, but we'll follow up with those following today's webinar. So John, Xiomara, I want to thank you so much for sharing as we move on to the next slide. But really great to hear about the focus groups, and we'll be sure to share this recording and the slides out with folks who are interested to do some of the same work in their own communities. As we get close to summer, I know for many folks, Memorial Day is the traditional start to summer. Summer school may have already let out in some areas, and certainly will be doing so in the weeks to come. I want to share a few outreach resources from No Kid Hungry. Xiomara and John mentioned the Summer Meals texting hotline, which is live for summer 2019, and it's now in its 7th year. Families can text food or comida to 877-877. The service operates in both English and Spanish to receive information on up to 3 summer meal sites. So we're encouraging today's listeners to include information about the hotline in their outreach materials. And there's also going to be an overview one-pager linked in the deck when it goes out so that you can answer any questions that you may get from the community about how this service operates. Also want to highlight an awareness building toolkit that was just released by No Kid Hungry that includes a menu of options to leverage outreach opportunities for summer meals with regard to diverse audiences, including reporters and press, social media, and community outreach at large, with templates, best practices, and other resources. And this week, in fact, is a great time to ramp up press outreach around summer meals, and the toolkit provides guidance and resources to make that happen and to amplify the impact. And additionally, I'd like to call attention to our outreach materials, which are ready-made promotional materials that are available in English and Spanish to help publicize summer meals in your community. So please, folks, feel free to take and use those. Those are standardized and modifiable resources that you can use in your community. And on the final slide, as we wrap up, I want to let everyone know that our next webinar will occur on Thursday, June 13th at 2 p.m. Eastern, and will be focused on engaging community leaders, including elected officials, to strengthen summer meals. And we'll have a special focus on how you can engage local elected officials to amplify your efforts to expand access to these programs. And as Emily mentioned, in addition to the slide deck and the recording of today's webinar and additional resources, you'll receive a link to register for next month's webinar. So John, Xiomara, and Ria, thank you so much for your work and serving as panelists today. Emily, thanks for being our webmaster for today's event. And I want to thank all of you on the line for the work that you're doing to increase access to summer meals, and wish you the very best as summer meals begins to ramp up. Don't hesitate to reach out, and we hope you'll join us again on June 13th. Have a good day.